It's really close.
Let's see, people. April 1861, the first month of the Civil War. Alfred M. Greene gave a speech to the freed slaves in the North. Although not yet permitted to enter the Union Army, Greene was attempting to convince them to enlist if the opportunity arose. In this speech, Greene used a number of methods in attempting to persuade these African Americans. Greene attempted to appeal to their sense of pride in their race. He said, "The time has arrived when we may give evidence to the world of the bravery and patriotism of a race." Greene, aiming to unite the freed slaves, wanted them to take pride in their race, their heritage, and their country. Understanding the troubled past between African Americans and their country, Greene still attempted in creating some level of pride in their country. He said, "My country, right or wrong, I love thee still." Greene understood that freed slaves had a deep mistrust in their country due to the gross grievances dealt to them. However, Greene believed there could be change. He believed that the Civil War was the change, and regardless of their grievances, this was still their country, and they needed to fight for it. Next, Greene addressed the grievances and thereupon the objections of his audience. "It is true," he said, "the brave deeds of our fathers have failed to bring us into recognition as citizens. It is true," he continued, "our injuries in many respects are great: fugitive slave laws, Dred Scott decisions, indictments for treason." He addressed their grievances to show his level of understanding and sympathy towards the free slaves. Understanding that there was no excuse available for these grievances, Greene did not refute these claims, but rather appealed to the African American sense of duty. "Our duty," Greene said, "is not to cavil over past grievances." Greene understood the grievances, but believed that it was time to let bygones be bygones and fight for the freedom of their race. He continued, "Let us not derelict the duty in this time of need." Again, he used word duty to show that it was not simply a choice to fight for their race. It is a responsibility owed to their enslaved brethren in the South. Greene continued this idea of duty by appealing to the duty these freed slaves owed to their ancestors. Greene said, "Let not the honor and glory achieved by our fathers be blasted or sullied by a want of true heroism among their sons." Greene was stating that not only was there responsibility owed to their brethren down south, but additionally, there was a responsibility owed to ancestors who had to face hardship and to those who had risked their lives for freedom. Greene was strongly making a case that by not fighting, all the effort in the past will have to be gone to waste. Next, Greene brought God into his argument to give it reason for his highly religious audience. He said, "Let us, then, take up the sword, trusting in God, who will defend the right." With not much else to put trust in, African American slaves put a lot of trust in God, and thus it was imperative for Greene to bring God into his argument. He stated the war cry of the Southern states, addressing their goals to build stronger the tyrant system of slavery in the great American Republic. He was appealing to their sense of religious reason by making a claim that because they were on the right side of morality, God would take their side. Greene continued his argument of reason by stating the world today favored their side of the argument. The world today is on the side of freedom and universal political equality. Greene was attempting to inspire African Americans that they are not the philosophical minority, but rather the whole world had their back. Next, Greene attempts to persuade the freed slaves by demoralizing the enemy. Howling leaders of secession, he described them as. By describing them as howling, he is making them inhuman, immoral, animalistic. By making them less human, he distances the freed slaves from them and further paints the pro-slavery Southerns as the enemy. Finally, Greene put the freed slaves on a pedestal, making the claim that their role in fighting this war was essential in inspiring the freed slaves. "Your very presence," he said, "would inspire your oppressed brethren in the South with zeal for the overthrow of the tyrant system." By joining the Union Army, the freed slaves would have served as a symbol for hope for enslaved to take up arms and fight for freedom. Greene, at this point, is persuading by putting the African Americans on a pedestal, telling them how essential they are in winning the war. Alfred M. Greene took a position of the potential role of African Americans in the Union Army. He believed their involvement was necessary to winning the war, and thus gave a speech attempting to persuade freed slaves to join the Union Army. He used a number of methods to achieve this, including appealing to their sense of duty, demoralizing the enemy, and telling them to put their trust in God. Thank you for my speech.